Recently, my wife's laptop froze up. Now she's got Linux Mint Debian Edition on her laptop. And recently the laptop, they were listening to a podcast or audiobook, and they used a Bluetooth speaker, and the computer froze up, so she had to do a hard shutdown. So I don't think it was actually the operating system's problem. I think it was the hardware, because it's kind of a cheap laptop. It's kind of old, kind of cheap. So I don't think there was anything wrong with the Linux Mint operating system. I think it had to do with the hardware. But when it came back up, the sound settings were kind of messed up, because it automatically reconnected back to the Bluetooth speaker, but instead of using like stereo sound, it was using like this muffled mono speaker. So she called me in to do some troubleshooting, and I thought this is a good idea for a short little video on how to troubleshoot this. But before we look at the troubleshooting, if you are interested in just connecting your Bluetooth speaker to Linux Mint, you can go to a search engine like DuckDuckGo, just type in Linux Mint Bluetooth speakers, and it'll give you some detailed step-by-step instructions here on what to do to connect your Bluetooth speakers. And then you also can go on Linux Mint forums, and there's information on troubleshooting Bluetooth audio devices. So there's all kinds of resources out there that you can read and find out specific information. So what I'm going to cover here is not necessarily digging down into specific information, but I just want to give a high-level overview of my mindset when I'm troubleshooting. So I kind of wrote this stuff down over here in a text file here. So we're going to kind of look at some of these steps. But I've got the system settings pulled up over here to kind of let you see that this is your system settings, this is your Bluetooth, and this is your sound. You can also access these same things down here in the taskbar, Bluetooth, and then sound settings right here. So you can go to system settings, or you can go down here on your toolbar and access the exact same thing. But I thought it would be a good idea to pull this system settings up to show you that what we're talking about is right here in your hardware settings under your system settings. This is actually one of the things that really has kept me on Linux Mint, is having everything in one place here. And this kind of like what used to be your classic Windows control panel from years ago. So anyway, looking back here, Linux Mint, Bluetooth speakers, we're going to do some troubleshooting. So first thing I always do before I try to fix anything, especially on Linux Mint, is to do updates and upgrade. So let me show you how to do that. We'll go over here. Let's jump over here to a different terminal. So sudo apt update. Okay. So we're going to make sure we got all the updates, and it doesn't look like there's anything ready. But the command if you did have updates, is sudo apt upgrade. So that's what you do for Linux Mint update and upgrade, just to make sure everything's up to date and current when you're troubleshooting. Now this next step is kind of a throwback to the days when I was doing troubleshooting for Windows PCs when I worked for a city government, when I used to have to troubleshoot computers for city employees. One of the first steps people always do when they're troubleshooting a Windows PC is just restart the computer, and 9 times out of 10 that'll fix a Windows problem. So then the next step here is, and I do that, and I guess because of the habit of doing that, I usually do that on Linux too, which I don't think is really necessary on Linux, but I do it anyway just out of habit. So Bluetooth, what we want to do here when we're troubleshooting this to try to figure out why the Bluetooth speaker is no longer working correctly is we're going to start with the Bluetooth first, and we're going to turn it off and turn it on. So to go here, you go to Bluetooth, and so I do have something that is synced, but I'm not actually actively using this right here. This is kind of like your little earbuds. But if it was a Bluetooth speaker, it would show up in here if you've already connected that device. Now to turn off Bluetooth and turn it back on, there's this button right here. You can click to disable, and then you click it back to disable, And sometimes just restarting Bluetooth may fix the problem. So that's how to turn it off and turn it back on. And then you might actually have to remove the device. So you can click on this little minus symbol here in the menu bar to remove the device, turn the device off, then turn the device back on, and then resync it or reconnect it again. So sometimes disconnecting a device and reconnecting a device to your Bluetooth will fix the problem. So if you're still having a sound problem and you've done all this with Bluetooth, then the problem is not actually with Bluetooth. But we're just going down the steps here, looking at this is a process of elimination. This is the steps I used to, basically troubleshooting any problem with computers. I used to use a process of elimination, starting with the most obvious, like restarting a computer or getting updates, and then turning whatever the program is that's causing a problem, turning it off, turning it back on, and trying to troubleshoot that first to make sure there's nothing simple. Always start with simple stuff. I learned this when I was trying to troubleshoot networking problems years ago, and I would go through all these steps on a computer trying to troubleshoot why a city employees can't get on the internet, and then finally, after about an hour of troubleshooting, I would look behind the PC and find that their network cable was unplugged. So that's when I learned to always do the simple things first when you're troubleshooting, because a lot of times the simple is what the problem is. So always look and find out what is the simple things I can look at first. So we looked at Bluetooth. So the next thing we want to do is actually go into the sound settings. So let's say the problem is still there. You're still getting mono sound, not stereo sound. So let's open up the sound settings. You'll notice here for under output, you have different devices. Now I have some headphones plugged into my PC, and I also have some USB headphones plugged into my PC. Now I'm not going to try to change this right now because I'm actually using this for recording. But this is where you would look. And what I would do or suggest doing if you're having a problem with the sound is to try to flip back and forth between different devices, because sometimes the same device will have 2 different or 3 different entries right here, and I'm not sure why that happens, but you can flip around here to figure it out. And then when you feel like you found the right device, you can click on Test Sound and do that. Now you may or may not hear that because I've got the desktop audio turned off on my recording software here. So, but then you got input. So this is like I'm using a USB audio device to record the audio for this video. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this selected. And so you got output and input. Also, you can kind of switch between drivers here. So this little drop down here, there's no extra drivers, but sometimes you may have more than one driver that you can use here for switching back and forth. And usually I have found that if everything else fails, then going into your system settings under your sound here, well, you can fix the problem by clicking back and forth right in here until you find the correct device and find the correct driver, and that will usually fix the problem. I don't know why. Sometimes those problems happen, but it's not the first time. But usually it happens when you have some other problem on your computer, like a hard shutdown, or like if you have a problem with your computer freezing up, and then you go back after restarting the machine, you may have sometimes your sound may get scrambled up, and you have to go back and find the correct device again. So those are the steps I took in troubleshooting my wife's laptop, and then we were able to what fixed hers was actually finding the correct device and the correct driver. And once we did that, it fixed her problem, and she had stereo sound once again so that they could listen to their audiobook. I hope this information helps out. Subscribe to the channel, click like, click on your notifications. Thank you very much.